Well, greetings again. This is Paul. This is my wife, Debbie, Annette. And as you know from our first couple videos, we have given you a greeting and devotional and then reviewed our principles of making a great marriage from 3 years ago when we were there. So we have one other short video that we want to share, and I wanted to make sure that my wonderful wife of 45 years was in this one because we're just going to talk a little bit about our marriage and our family and some of the things that have been meaningful to us in making a marriage last and a great marriage. So Deb, maybe you would just introduce our wonderful couples in CBS Rwanda leaders to our family.
I'd love to do that. So great to be able to talk to you all, even though we can't be there in person. Some of you know our story, some of you don't, so we'll just give you a little background on us. We met in college. We're both college students. And just before Paul graduated, we met. We dated for 3 years, and we've now, as Paul said, been married for 45 years, which is quite an accomplishment in America, as possibly it is in Africa. I was a school teacher, taught special education and regular grade school, and when we had children, stayed home to be a mom. Paul has been in business for over 40 years, and he has been a strong supporter of our family. We have 2 married children. Michelle is 37 years old, and she and her husband, Brian, have 2 children, 1 boy and 1 girl, ages 4 and 6. And our son, Jonathan, lives out in Seattle, quite a distance from us in a different state. And he and his wife have 2 children, ages 7 and 10. So we have 4 grandchildren, 2 children that live just a few miles away from us that we see regularly, and then our 2 grandchildren, half of the US away from us, a 3-hour plane ride when we have a chance to visit them. So that is our family.
Yeah, about 2,000 miles away from where we live. So we only get to see them 3 or 4 times a year. Yeah, our one of our grandchildren today, when we're making this video for you, just started what we call an America kindergarten. So he is 6 years old and started, I think it would be called P1 in Rwanda. And so, yeah, our children grow rapidly, as you folks know. Well, that's our background, and we've known each other. We dated each other 3 years before we got married, and then we've been married 45 years, so we've known each other for 48 years. And one of the things that we've discovered during that time is that we're very different in about every way that you can think of. We grew up in different economic families, one in what we call kind of middle class and one lower income. I grew up in the lower income family. We grew up in very different religions. Debbie was Catholic growing up. I was a Baptist growing up. And so we had differences there when we got married, and even before we got married, we agreed to what we would do there. We're both followers of Jesus and have Jesus in our heart and accepted Christ before we got married. But a lot of the religious differences were always part of our early years of marriage. We're different personalities. Deb is an introvert and I'm an extrovert. Deb likes to do things alone and to have quiet time. And I like to be out with people and talking to people and meeting with people, which is a lot of what my job is that I do. And we both have different interests and strengths and weaknesses. But in America, we have something that we say that opposites attract one another. And we found that to be true before you get married. Those opposites are very attractive. But once you're married, you try to change the other person into you and your interests and desires and personality. So being opposite is wonderful because if you're open-minded and willing to listen to one another, which is hard to learn, you hear one side of an issue and then you hear another side of an issue, and chances are the middle of those two extremes is the right answer. So we are opposite, and we have learned to have conflict, haven't we?
Yes.
I don't think a week goes by that we don't see things differently on something. That would be normal. Or I have an expectation that Deb's going to do something, and she has one of me, but we don't meet those expectations. And so I would just say the first principle we want to share is that conflict in marriage is not good or bad. It's just going to happen. You will see things differently, and you will have expectations of one another that maybe you haven't even expressed, but that the other person does not meet or has not met. So we know for sure that the goal is to have unity and not disunity in our marriage, in our family, in our church, in our homes, because disunity is the greatest tool and the greatest weapon we believe that Satan has to break up everything from a marriage and a family to a country. And we are going through plenty of disunity in our country in America. We know that you've been praying for us. So we would like to share some background and some lessons that we learned from in our marriage from a seminar that we went to. And Han, maybe you just tell them about that seminar.
About 15 years ago, Paul and I went to a 2-day seminar. It was offered at our church by a speaker that came in. And we have found it so helpful in our marriage. We really wished we had heard the things that they were teaching many, many years earlier, because they seemed so logical and they worked well, but we'd never had been exposed to them before. So the title of the seminar was Love and Respect. And the person that was giving the seminar said these are the two most important things in a marriage: love and respect for one another. The female, I especially need to know that Paul loves and respects me. He very much needs to know that I love and respect him. And Paul's going to give some examples and show how some of these principles work out.
So we went through our material from the seminar, and we picked out 5 or 6 key things that we think have been helpful for us that we learned there and that we have been trying to practice in our marriage. But one of the principles that they started the seminar with was they talked about when couples get into what they call the crazy cycle. And the crazy cycle happens when one issue or 2 issues keep coming up and surfacing in your relationship. And all of a sudden, the issue isn't the issue anymore, but the feelings and the emotions you have about the past and about things. And it starts you spinning in what he calls a crazy cycle. One person talks and the other doesn't listen. Then the other person talks and the other one doesn't listen. And it goes back and forth till it seems like you're more attacking the person than you're attacking the difference or the problem. And so we often have thought of what are the crazy cycle things in our marriage and in our lives? And certainly you have them in Rwanda, we have them in America and in our marriage as well. And so then they started talking about some of the key principles, and these are the things that we would like to focus for the next 5 or 10 minutes on. The first one is communications.
They really talk about the importance of communication in a relationship, in a marriage. You have to be open and honest about how you're feeling, what you're thinking about. And yet, you have to agree in an area. In the end, you have to agree on what you're going to do and go forward with it. But one of the things they really stressed that we had no idea about how men and women may be different. The wife may need more face-to-face time communicating, just sitting and talking without interruptions, could be anywhere, sitting in a park, doing anything that you're able to face-to-face communicate with. A man, on the other hand, values just as much or more time spent what he calls shoulder to shoulder. It could be him doing a sporting event that I'm watching with him. It could be him doing a project around the house that I'm either helping him with or just even present. He gave the example of someone painting a house. The husband was on the ladder painting the house, and he wanted the wife to come out and watch him paint the house. And she said, why would I come and sit in a chair and watch you paint the house when I can't be helpful? And just for him, it was very relationship building to have her be there and be present and doing it next to him. So men would be more inclined to do an activity together. Women would just as soon sit and talk. And that is a hard thing for each of the other to realize the importance of. But we've been working on that ever since. And really, we have our code words now for it. We need shoulder to shoulder time, or we need face to face time. We both can use both, but one relies on one preference over the other.
So in America, we have something called football, which isn't soccer. It's a different kind of football than you have in Rwanda. And Sunday afternoons on fall and winter are football season. And so I love getting home from church, having a meal, and sitting down with the newspaper and watching football. And Deb doesn't have any interest in football, but she will oftentimes just come down and sit with me for 3 hours or 4 hours and watch a football game, which she has no interest in. So that is that shoulder to shoulder time. We're together, even though we're not communicating about anything. At the end of us making this recording, we're going to go and have something to eat. We don't have children at home anymore. So Deb's idea of quality time with each other is face-to-face time. So when we sit down and have a meal together, that's something that's very special to Deb. Well, the next one is listening. Part of communication is listening. And communication, I think sometimes we think of sending messages to another person, but more importantly in listening, it's receiving the messages and listening and hearing one another in our marriages. And so learning to listen and not try to solve the problem is very important. We learned in our seminar for men to do with their wives. Deb will oftentimes bring up a problem or an issue or something that's bothering her. And my first reaction is to give her 3 or 4 ideas of ways she can solve the problem. But that isn't what Deb is looking for. What she's looking for is just the opportunity for me to listen to her and try to understand what she's thinking and help her process it instead of solve the problem. So listening is a very important element. The next one is to express your love for one another. You know, I think, and we've noticed even in Rwanda, that men and women are less likely, it seems sometimes, to show affection and their love for one another. And Deb and I will walk down the street and hold hands, or I'll have my arm around people, and sometimes people will come up and say, oh, it's so nice to see 2 older people still expressing their love for one another. So for me to know and hear the words from Deb, I love you, or Deb, from me, I love you, are very important. And in the seminar, they talked about the importance of expressing your love.
One of the things that is important to everyone, but possibly men in particular, is expressing appreciation for things that they do. And I know for Paul, this is important. routine things he does around the house. He's so helpful at home. Even in America, people are often surprised to hear how helpful Paul is and how he just jumps in and does things. And I have always appreciated that, but I just learned from this seminar that he needs to know in words that I appreciate rather than just assuming that he knows. Special things he does for me, gets a special gift or plans special time to just relax or have a good time together, go someplace together. Another thing that's important for men to know, if they are supporting the family as Paul has for most of our marriage, letting them know I really appreciate that. He works very, very hard. He loves what he does, but he also needs to know that I really appreciate how he has financially supported our family over the years and how hard he works and how good he is at the work that he does because he really does enjoy it. And he mentioned to me that I do this in front of others, not just to him. I really hadn't even realized that I do that, but it's just, he stands out among other men as far as being very helpful and supportive and just an encourager. And so for him to know that I appreciate that and me mention it in front of other people makes it extra special, I guess, to him.
Yeah.
He's told me it has.
Yeah, I especially when we have something that we earn points, and she'll often say, "Oh, that earned 5 points or 10 points. Thank you for doing the dishes, or thank you for preparing a meal." Things that I know in Rwanda are not as common as what they are in America and in our marriage. Well, the next item that we have is to make your wife, and they called it your number 2 priority in your life. God and our relationship with Jesus should be our number 1 priority. But our number 2 priority should be our spouse. And oftentimes other things, whether it's work, they're good things. It's work or our children or ministry or other things can take the place of making our spouse our number 2 priority. And so that would be something that is really a challenge because I know in Rwanda you are all so busy. It's difficult to take time together and make your spouse that priority. Well, the last one that we wanted to talk about is, we already really did talk about it, and that is, instead of trying to change the other person, is to appreciate the differences that they bring to the marriage. As we said, we are all different, and being in marriage is always more than a 50-50 compromise. As a matter of fact, we heard a speaker one time say it should be a 100% compromise. I try to give 100%, Deb tries to give 100%. But understanding and appreciating one another's differences is important. Sometimes before marriage, I think we appreciate the difference, and after the marriage, like I said earlier, we try to change those differences to become more like ourselves. Well, these are some ways that you can show love and respect towards one another. And we have found in our marriage that these principles are oftentimes very hard to do. And even after 45 years of marriage, we still see things differently. We still don't meet one another's expectations. And we oftentimes, will end up hurting one another's feelings without intentionally doing it or knowing that we're doing it sometimes even. So we hope that there's a few things that you can take away from this short video that will help you strengthen your marriage. We know how difficult it has been in Rwanda the last 18 months. We know how you've struggled, and we know how you've been discouraged. And we know sometimes things seem hopeless. But we want to give you our prayer, our thoughts, our love, our financial support to help support you and your families. We know that it has been very difficult, much more difficult than it's been in America, but it has been all over the world. So we want to give you hope and have you be hopeful. And we don't want you to be discouraged. We want you to be encouraged. For we love you. There are hundreds of people in America with your classes of CBS praying for you and encouraging you. And we just want to thank you for all that you're doing to support Community Bible Study Rwanda. And we hope that the restrictions are taken away and we can restart CBS like it was before the pandemic. God bless each of you. Deb, would you like to say any final words?
We've so missed seeing you in person, but we decided this is a way that we can at least have some contact one direction, a little bit here and there. Looking forward to the time when we can be back with you in person.
Amen. So couples, take one thing from one of the lectures or talks that we've done and share what you're going to work on with your spouse. Debbie and I, once a year, set 2 goals of ways that we can become a better husband or a better wife to one another. And so marriage is something that if you don't work on it, it doesn't get better by itself, it gets worse. So work on your marriages, show love for one another and love for the Lord. And thank you so much for all that you